move on to that, I just wanted to make sure before we do that, that in LO2, you've used actual documentation.
Yeah.
So you produced copies of initial assessment documents for two learners, an explanation of the process of admission leading up to teaching, and copies of two learners' ILPs, which covers 2.4. And I put on there, one, ostensibly having a learning issue that you've produced, which is to be actual and filled in and submitted as an appendix. And then the learning issue can be invented to show adaptation later in the unit. Yeah. If you've got no learners with a specific issue, then you can put one in to say what you would do in those circumstances, yeah.
So what form does this initial assessment diagnostic test take?
Well, if your college should have this documentation in place, and all learners, when they go on to any course, should have gone through at least the initial assessment part of it. Usually, the diagnostic is only used for functional skills, because it can say, the initial assessment will say perhaps, yes, you're at level 1 working towards level 2. What the diagnostic does is say which parts of LO2 of level 2 you need to concentrate on and which you're okay at. So when you're moving from that level 1 to level 2, these are the things you need to concentrate on to get to attain level 2 without being, trying to do the whole thing. It will identify the areas of your English or your maths that need to be improved. So that's what the diagnostic does, and not everybody does a diagnostic for that reason. Apprenticeships will do, because again they have to have a level 2 or an ATHE and GCSE before they can take on the apprenticeship program, because it requires a vocational related qualification, could be a national certificate or something of that nature, to run alongside the apprenticeship. So a diagnostic will be done with, say, apprentices, but for ordinary trainees that are coming in that are not doing or not on a specific program, they're doing a course, then the initial assessment is to assess their initial skills, what their basic skills of reading and writing are, and their ability in the area that they're going to be trained in. What they're going to bring with them already. Once that documentation is completed, it's then presented on here. Just all you've got to do is take the learners' names out and put A and B. Again, this is if this is not an operation that you get involved in, then you need to get the copies from the person that's done the initial assessment. And then all you really need to do is say, right, these are copies of 2 of my students who have been assessed for initial assessment, and the results then have been added into the learning plan, and a copy of the learning plan then goes in, for those 2 learners to show that operation has been done. Because
sorry, just to cut you off. The problem I'm running into is being that it's a school. I've got 2 examples from that have obviously have the names and dates and everything taken out. Which I got from the school Senko. But the thing is, there isn't really like a sort of an objective. Everything is done, like all the targets is done basically based on classwork and grades.
Basically. The simple answer to that is yes. What you have then is, once that's been done and that initial assessment has been carried out, whoever's carried that out, if they haven't needed to do a diagnostic, they will then produce an individual learning plan for that learner. And that learning plan will have what their goals are and how they're going to achieve it. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, that's because basically on here it says explain why it is important and analyse the role and use of these things in agreeing learning goals. Use methods, and then again it's use and record. So it's asking you to produce those documents, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think, you know, take a look at what I've sent through.
Yeah, as I say, I'll look at that and come back to you on it.
Yeah.
From what you did for Unit 1, I mean, the notes I put on, if you remember, there wasn't very much to do. It was just needed to add a few things in to make it meet the actual assessment criteria. I pretty well stick to what it says on here.
Okay.
And using the command verbs, provide the information according to those. Now, if that's done, there's not a problem usually. It usually goes straight through. But what it is, what it tries to do, basically, it would take an awful lot longer to explain a whole process of initial assessment and why it was done and so forth without the documentation. This is meant to actually cut down the amount you need to write, because it is a big unit, yeah? So looking at learning objective 3 now, this is to be able to plan inclusive teaching and learning. And this is the planning process. After you've done your initial assessment, you've set a learning plan together, you then need to actually put a teaching and learning plan in place, and that comes in the form of a scheme of work that you will teach this program or this course over X number of weeks, and it will include a number of things. So you've got your scheme of work, which will plan out. It's much like I will be doing in the next couple. Well, I'm hoping to have it done before next week. Actually, I'm going to plan out our sessions, and I'm going to make sure that you get a copy of that running forward 5, 6, 7 weeks, even 8 weeks sometimes, on the subjects that we'll be covering on each of those programs. And that's basically my scheme of work. What goes into those sessions is my lesson plans. This is what I'm going to actually deliver and talk about during those sessions. So on this one, then you've got to put together, devise a scheme of work. Now you may already have one for your course. By all means, copy of that. Yeah. You don't need to cover the whole course. You need to put your scheme of work in place, saying what it will be over what number of weeks. But once you've done that, design teaching and learning plans which respond to the individual goals and needs of the learners and the curriculum requirements. Now, those lesson plans then will be detailed of what you'll be delivering on one unit. Yeah.
Okay.
Or even part of it.
Am I just going to need one lesson plan?
Yeah, sufficient. One of the lesson plans down from your scheme of work. Yeah, that shows what the learners are doing, what you are doing, and what resources you've used, etc., etc.
Okay.
Again, copies of your lesson plans describe where and how you use them. Yeah.
Mhm.
Again, a quick explanation of how that planning is meeting the needs of your learners with regard to what you found earlier. Yeah.
Okay.
3.3 is explaining how your own planning meets the individual needs of learners. Oh, sorry, I'm missing one out. Sorry, I'll read that again.
Okay.
Explain ways in which teaching and learning plans can be adapted to meet the individual needs of learners. Yeah. Now that is exactly what I talked about earlier on. It needs an example of how you would adapt a specific part of a learning plan for a learner that had a learning issue. Yeah. Now, as I said earlier, if you've got a learner with an issue and you know what you're going to be doing to help them, then fine, you just detail that. If you haven't, you can decide on that I have a learner that has a sight problem or a hearing problem or dyslexia, something of that nature that you may have met before or not met before, but then put that then and show how you would adapt your delivery of that particular session for that learner.
Okay, so it's like differentiation, basically.
Yeah, showing where, for instance, if you've had to bring a signer in as an extra resource, or you've got somebody that can't write very well for some reason, and you've brought a scribe in for them to actually write what they're actually asking them to write. There are a number of interventions you can put in place to cover a whole range of disabilities and conditions, but without actually stepping very far from the learning plan that you've set up. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did speak a bit about that in LO2.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Again, transferable information from other parts of the unit. A lot of this work crosses over, as I've said. As you move through the qualification, you'll find that we can cross-reference work that you've already completed into similar circumstances within the assessment criteria or the units as well. And finally, identify opportunities for learners to provide feedback to inform inclusive practice. And that is where I know a lot of schools now put in feedback sessions for the learners to come back with how they found the lesson. Yeah. So that the teacher can get some feedback as to what's going in and what isn't. what you could adapt then to actually meet those needs that are being then presented at a later date. Yeah. Not all schools do that. I will point that out. But some schools that I've met on here have actually got feedback sheets that they use with the learners and the teacher. And if you've got those, great. You can put a copy of those in as well. Again, it's 3.5. The easiest way is to show a completed feedback questionnaire, which you've taken as feedback from students or workers in the case of work after the appraisal. Yeah.
Okay.
That then fulfills 3.5.
All right.
I'll run into LO4 for you tonight, because I'll cover some of that again in a minute, because it is a fairly short one. It's only 3 objectives, and there are 2 of them are just explanations, and the third one is partly covered by any observations that you'll do. You'll need to do a number of teaching observations or records with someone in your establishment during the course, and some of that will cover some of these command words where it says establish and sustain a safe, inclusive learning environment. Now, you can't really write about something that says establish. You've got to show that you've done it, and the best way of that is to capture that on the observation form. Yeah.
Sure. How many observations do I need to have?
I will clarify this. The external verifier that we've got is a bit of a stickler for these, and has said that she needs to see, I'm not sure if she said 6 or 8 over the qualification, yeah?
Okay.
So it's one about every 6 weeks, something of that nature. So it's explain ways it's important to promote appropriate behaviour and respect for others, and explain ways to promote equality and value diversity in the establishment and in the classroom that you're in charge of, really. So 4.1 is read and respond. There is some material on the VLE which to read on promoting appropriate behaviour and dealing with behavioural issues. Most schools have a policy with regard to difficult behaviour, I'll put it that way, and that could be just explained on why it's important to promote that and to show respect for others and how your policy meets that. Yeah, you'll have the college or school will have an equality and diversity policy and really just the explanation of how that's actually implemented, yeah. Okay. And then 4.3 is read and respond, use work and school, college, health and safety policy to explain how this is implemented, yeah, all the way through. Again, establishing and sustaining a safe, inclusive learning environment is, in a word, you can't do that. There is not many ways you can make an assessment of that without an observation. And that is part of that will be a question on there, was a safe and inclusive learning environment established during the observation? And the answer to that is yes, and a short say of why it's yes, and that basically then covers 4.3, yeah?
Are there pro formas for the observations that have to be used?
I have a fairly straightforward one, which I can send to you if the college... See, quite often you may have one already, and it's easier to use the ones that you've got within your establishment. If you haven't, then fine, I've not a problem. I've got stuff on the VLE that you can use as well.
Yeah, if you could send it to me, that would be great.
Yeah. So let me just go to the... Just find if I can find one back on it. There's a feedback form there if you haven't got one. Observation record sheet, there we are. Make sure it's the right one.
I've got this.
Yeah. Oh, no, that's not the one. That's for anybody that's doing MBQ type qualifications, yeah. Go back to there.
Okay.
I'm just going to take content so next year.
I should have a copy of this on mine, surely.
Yeah, all these you can access on here.
Okay.
So we got lesson plans, template for learning observation, observation report, education and training, level 3 award. That's not the right one. Officer indicators. Scheme of work on there. A document if you've not got any. Let's have a look at. Yeah, this is the NCFE one. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this bit here, a total of 3 hours must be observed on a minimum of 3 occasions. So that's 3 1 hours or 6 half-hour observations, yeah? Minimum length of observation is 30 minutes.
All right.
But I'm sure she was pulling her face about that and wanted it up to 8, I think it was. So, I'll check that back anyway, no problem.
Cool.
Again.
Okay.
Check the environment and resources beforehand, take into account health and safety issues, ensure there are enough resources for all learners, have the session plan to show aim and objectives of that learning outcome, deliver an introduction, main content and conclusion, establish and maintain a rapport with the individual group, demonstrate knowledge of the subject, take into account learning styles, excessive VARC, use a range of activities, communicate appropriately and effectively, manage the session appropriately, dealing with disruptions, appear confident and professional, take into account entitlement, equality, differentiation, inclusivity and diversity, and integrate minimum core into the delivery. Now, if you do that, that's fine. It doesn't. You don't actually have to do that. But a lot of schools do integrate some minimum core into the delivery of a number of subjects, yeah.
Yeah.
Ask questions and involve the group where appropriate. Give positive feedback where appropriate. Summarise the session. Achieve the learning outcomes for that plan. clear the area afterwards if that's relevant, and complete any relevant documentation or records. And again, this is the bit identify opportunities for learners to provide feedback and then evaluate their session. Yeah. So that is really an observation sheet, and it's a quick yes/no, and then comments at the side of that. It's a fairly straightforward one to use for any school or establishment that don't actually have this do this operation as a general practice, because it cuts down the amount that the observer has to write. They can make a decision here, some quick notes there, and then write it up afterwards, and obviously then discuss it with the teacher. Yeah. So that's the format for that, and that is on. Oops, close that down. Oh no, I have to move this over. Observation form. Road I've got, that's it.
Oh, it's in the templates.
Close that back. So all those are on that. Identify areas, provide feedback, explain ways in which teaching and learning plans can be adapted, explain how your own planning meets the individual needs early on, that was early on in the list. Design learning plans, which that's your learning plans in your scheme of work. Yeah, but the second three on there are part of that observation, and certainly on 4, establishing and sustaining a safe and inclusive learning environment. And the other 2 are explaining ways in which to promote equality and diversity, and explain why it's important to promote appropriate behaviour and respect for others. And again, this will involve documentation that your school should already have, and policies that should be in place already. Are you inspected by Ofqual?
No.
You're not?
Very rarely.
Sorry?
Very rarely, I believe.
But you may have, if you have been, then you will have to have had all these documents in place. So they will be available. What I always advise, well, everybody to do really, is if you're not sure about anything, there will be a person in your school responsible for quality. It may be internal quality assurer, it may be a quality manager. Somebody of that with one of those titles will have to be involved in that session, in that process, and they are a good source of information with regard to documentation that's needed. Yeah. So if you can find out in your school who has that responsibility, they will be of use to you right the way through this course. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's actually available on our website. So.
Well, yeah, and again, there will be stuff on the website that you can print off and use. And then one of the things that, as I said, quite a lot of schools don't do is that bit. Providing opportunities for learners to provide feedback. Yeah. It is a contentious issue. At what age you start to do this? Older kids, I would say below 10, it's not, you can get more by asking questions and listening. But 10 onwards, then written or recorded feedback is good, because you get some nonsense in there as well, I know that, but you'll be able to sort of glean the bits of information that you need from that written feedback with regard to, well, basically your performance on the lesson, because there will be, although, and I've done this many times, I've put stuff in that I thought would go down well and it hasn't, and I've then found out why it hasn't. That's allowed me not to just to discard it, but to actually modify it to make sure that the people that are going to listen to it understand it. So it's you know, you've got a bit of a fine line there. So some schools will have the documentation in place and use it. Others don't so much. And certainly in junior schools, method of getting that feedback is not usually recorded that way. Quite a lot of teachers will get the class into a group and ask them questions and get feedback that way. Again, they may record it themselves, but it's not really officially done on a document. So that's 3 point. Well, then they got objective 3 with leaning into 4. But as I said, 4 is not a very big one, and part of it will be covered by an observation anyway. 2, I think you've covered most of 2. You're going to send that in, yeah?
Yeah.
I will pick up any work you've got before next week, and I will then let you have that back.
Okay.
Is that good?
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much.
Okay, I'm going to try and run a short lesson after this one, so I will close now, and thank you for attending. And again, don't forget, I'm at the end of the text or whatever if you've got an issue.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Okay, yeah. Speak to you next week then. Bye for now. Thanks for attending.
Bye.